How you doing today, review family? Me personally, I woke up today and I chose violence! I wanted to give some of my hot takes on some of the more overrated metal bands. So I compiled a list of 10 bands that I consider to be overrated. But it's a pretty subjective thing of saying what is under or overrated, so what's my personal definition? For me, the one thing I want to preface this with is I actually love and listen to quite a few of the bands on this list. I own material from them, I own merchandise from them, so by no means is this list saying that I am invalidating them or their talent. I actually love a lot of these bands. The way that I'm personally defining my list is bands that get a lot of recognition for something that I just don't think they necessarily deserve the recognition for, i.e. either sycophant type of fans, zealots that praise at the altar of them, or just a lot of fans that pretty much praise them as if they're the best thing since sliced bread, oftentimes crediting them for doing things that other bands that came before them did or did even better, considering bands trailblazers or people that are reinventing the wheel when in reality they are just good bands and it doesn't really transcend that. But the fun part about this is I want to hear what your hot takes are of overrated metal bands. What bands do you think just don't deserve the amount of acclaim that they get, that you just cannot get behind for whatever reason? Go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear your guys' opinions. So let's get into it. Don't crucify me, but if you disagree, don't hesitate to let me know down in the comment section below if you completely disagree with one, multiple, or all of the things on this list. Just remember, it's all in good fun. I'm gonna try to keep these pretty concise, starting off with number 1, Blood Incantation. I am an OSDM fan. I love a lot of the modern bands that pay homage and bear the torch for bands like Death and Morbid Angel and Obituary and Autopsy. These bands like Witch Vomit and Mortiferum and Tomb Mold and Blood Incantation and Necrot. These bands are doing great. I like them. But holy fucking shit, could you not get people to shut the hell up about Blood Incantation when they burst on the scene? I remember all of the big reviewers, all of the big publications were singing so many praises for Blood Incantation, and while their alien aesthetic, I understand. It's fine, it's cool, it's gimmicky, it's fun. They're far from the first band to incorporate that, not just with death metal, but breaching past death metal. I think that while they have some grooves, while they have some riffs, their production style and their technique is nothing that you couldn't get from a whole host of other bands specifically coming out of the Midwest scene. There are plenty of bands that are doing the same style that Blood Incantation are doing, on par with them, or even better in my opinion. This was coming from a mile away. I did a video essay on it. I really enjoyed the most recent album, but I have to say Sleep Token. Listen, Sleep Token, they're perfectly fine. They're actually a really unique band in the grand scheme of their influences. It's actually not about their influences. It's about how they incorporate their influences. So many people are praising this band as being so mysterious and such an anomaly, and they're incorporating all of these different styles. But yeah, they are incorporating all of these styles in the most bare minimum, dime a dozen way. They are pretty much an eldritch abomination of all of these components that are pretty much just the most basic of necessities from each of the genres that they are borrowing from. And they are going to the wishing well of so many different genres like trap and R&B and metalcore and gen and progressive metal and post-rock and post-metal. And yes, on paper, it can excite a lot of people because you don't typically hear all of those things incorporated together. I will give credit where it's due in that regard. But if you're doing so in such a basic way, I think that's the issue. Because I did a video essay on them that I highly suggest you guys checking out. I worked really hard on it. I'm very proud of how it came out. The one thing I said in that video that I kind of want to just emphasize here is if you strip away all of the experimentation of their music and the avant-garde nature of their music, and you just examine the individual influences, it's really the most basic things from each genre they borrow from. Number 3, and this is actually a band I really love. I've covered their music. I have literally vocally covered their music. Currents. It pains me to say this, but people just really love Currents in a way that seems a little overblown, acting like they are the best thing to come out of metalcore in recent memory or one of the best bands. And while I can admit that some of their melodies and some of their progressions are really interesting, I just cannot really get behind how people praise them for doing something that a lot of other bands don't do already. Because the reason that people like Currents is their very insulated and dense production style to metalcore, where The drum work and the guitars feel like this labyrinth. They feel impenetrable. They are very asphyxiating, and I do appreciate that. But there are so many other dense, impenetrable metalcore bands out there. Number 4, and y'all might be confused with this, I'm going to say Anthrax. And I'm going to say Anthrax in fucking protest. Because here's the deal. Anthrax has reached the point over the decades where everyone has tried to make them overrated because they say they're underrated. And I think that's so funny because anytime you talk to like a thrash metal fan or someone that is trying to be like a hipster, they're always like, you know, Anthrax, they're just really underrated in the realm of thrash metal. And that has brought so much of like this cult of personality around Anthrax where they're this zeitgeist for all the pariahs and people think that they're doing something, they're changing the world by listening to Anthrax. And don't get me wrong, while they certainly are a very decent thrash metal band and better than a lot of others, they get absolutely fucking face smashed by the German thrash metal scene, and they can get completely outplayed by any of the other US Big Four. They get outgrooved by Megadeth, they get out melodicized by Metallica, they get out shredded by Slayer, they get out vocalized by James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine. The list goes on and on and on. Literally anything that they are doing, there are just thrash metal bands that pretty objectively do better. They are quote-unquote underrated for a reason. Sometimes things are overrated or underrated for a good reason. It's because they deserve to be underrated or overrated because they just aren't up to snuff with other things. Y'all aren't gonna like me very much for this one. Number 5, Balfegor. And it is simply because there are so many fucking better black and death metal bands than Balfegor. Balfegor as a project is a snooze fest. And you want to know another band that I just genuinely have never gotten behind? And my review of Not Dark Yet actually blew up because of like how much I went against the grain when it came to this band. Fluids. Ignorance Exalted and Not Dark Yet. This just feels like dime a dozen noise grind infused like brutal death grind. And I thought the distortion was tacky, I thought it was all overblown, and I thought nothing about the production nor the playing weren't really doing anything that I wasn't hearing from a whole host of other death grind and gore grind and grindcore bands. And maybe it's just because I frequent those genres and get past a lot of nasty, vile, underground, gruesome material, but I just didn't get it. I love noisy material, but something about Fluids just felt like noise for the sake of noise, and just so much style, not enough substance, not enough memorability, loud in the moment but did not leave a lasting impact. And I think I was right about my assessment because honestly, who is talking about Not Dark Yet now? I'm not seeing it. And at number 7, on a similar note of just overhyped bands that are just heavy and brutal but not doing anything that other bands aren't doing, Vulvodia. They're held as such a crown jewel of the slam metal scene, but I have never been able to understand what they're doing that a band like Atoll or Abominable Putridity or especially a band like Acrania are doing. We get it. It's loud. It's brutal. It's heavy. It's slamming. You have the grooves. And you have the fucking pitch-shifted vocals that just sound like a cricket. Just oh my god, this band is overhyped. Very similar to how I feel about Fluids. Style over substance, not much memorability, and nothing that sets them apart from these bands that they are held above. Next up, this hurts a little bit because this is a band from like my youth that I remember being huge. Dragon Force. I have never been, I will say, a power metal or a speed metal fan, but of the bands that I do enjoy, I think that Dragon Force are a little overhyped. And the reason for that is, can anyone name, unless you're just a diehard fan or a fan of Dragon Force, can you name 5 songs from them? 10 songs from them? And it's also kind of a situation of Anthrax where Dragon Force are held to a really high standard and beloved for their guitar playing, for their technicality, but I think that like Halloween and Blind Guardian and Sabaton are just better. Coming in at number 9, I have to say Acid Mammoth. I actually really like Acid Mammoth as a band. I think that their style is very psychedelic and doomy. It is sandy. It has that stoner rock aesthetic, but they literally just sound like fucking Black Sabbath. And it's unfortunate because I do like them, but I can admit the fact that they are really ripping from the same stuff of Black Sabbath and St. Vitus, and a lot of these stoner rock and stoner metal bands do the same, and it really just does reek of that copycat syndrome. And then finally, a band that I would probably put in like my top 50 favorite bands of all time, but I can say that they are overhyped. Carnifex. I love Carnifex. They are one of my favorite deathcore bands. But holy hell are they not original. They just aren't. When it comes to like the heavy death growl centric side of deathcore, the one where you aren't getting really many shrieks, you're mostly getting the death growls. I'm talking about the really nasty, like the breed of deathcore that comes from bands like Whitechapel and Thy Art Is Murder. Those bands are great. Don't get me wrong, I love Carnifex, but their heavy death ground, buff and gruff style of deathcore, it really isn't something you can't get from other bands, and it just comes down to a preference of if you enjoy them or not, but I do personally think that they are a little overrated. But with that being said, whether you like them or dislike them, what are some of your most overrated metal bands and why? And were there any on this list that you disagreed with? Let me know down in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear it. Be on the lookout for a follow-up video of underrated metal bands, because I definitely want to do that companion video. It just feels right. But for now, be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.